Get out! Don't even think about touching that board, Leo. Professor Evelyn Hargrove's voice cut through the lecture hall like a whip. Her perfectly polished nails jabbed at the air, each word dripping with scorn. The 32-year-old mathematics prodigy, whose awards from Oxford, MIT, and Princeton lined the walls behind her, had just humiliated a promising graduate student in front of 30 classmates. The room smelled faintly of chalk dust and polished oak floors, but the tension was palpable, like static electricity ready to spark. Leo Martinez froze, hands gripping his mop cart. Every pair of eyes in the room burned into his back as students smirked, some trying to stifle laughter, others wide-eyed in disbelief. He could feel their judgment, their assumptions pressing down like a weight. The irony wasn't lost on him. He had spent years mastering equations in the quiet of the janitor's closet, while these students paid thousands of dollars to hear Evelyn Hargrove lecture, believing brilliance belonged only to those with polished shoes and designer clothes. But instead of retreating, he took a step closer to the blackboard, where an equation sprawled across the surface like an unsolvable enigma. Symbols intertwined, variables looping into one another with elegant complexity. For anyone else, it might have been hieroglyphs. For Leo, it was a puzzle he had longed to solve in secret, one that teased his mind like a riddle only he could see clearly. Actually, Professor, Leo said quietly, his voice calm but steady. There's a small inconsistency in your derivation. The room went silent. Even the whispering of pens on paper and the shuffling of notebooks seemed to stop. Evelyn Hargrove's confident smile faltered for the briefest of moments, a micro-expression almost imperceptible, but enough to send ripples through the lecture hall. Everyone underestimated him. The janitor who quietly roamed the halls with a mop, who cleaned offices and chalkboards, who no one thought could grasp the abstract symbols she crafted. And yet, Leo wasn't just looking at numbers. He was seeing the flaw that not even the brightest students, or the celebrated professor herself, had noticed. For a heartbeat, the hum of disbelief filled the room. Some students leaned forward, in their seats, unsure if they'd misheard. Others glanced at one another, eyes wide with silent questions. Did he just... Evelyn's fingers twitched slightly as she adjusted the chalk in her hand, her perfectly manicured nails scraping softly against the slate. She had faced countless challenges in her career, but this quiet janitor questioning her work, was something entirely different. The room still buzzed with tension, but before anything else could happen, Leo glanced briefly toward the lecture hall doors, and you, watching this story unfold, might be wondering, where are you watching from? Whether it's the bustling streets of New York, the quiet corners of Tokyo, or somewhere far across the globe, we'd love to know. Drop your city or country in the comments below. It's incredible to see how this story is connecting people everywhere. And if you're enjoying the suspense, don't forget to subscribe and join the journey, because the next moments are about to change everything. Leo's dark eyes swept over the intricate arrangement of symbols on the blackboard. He could feel the mathematical logic unfolding in his mind, like a hidden pathway revealed under moonlight. Students whispered nervously, some holding their breath as the impossible tension stretched longer and longer. Evelyn Hargrove straightened, trying to regain composure, her posture regal but her lips pressed into a tight line. She had always been the queen of the lecture hall, the one whose brilliance went unquestioned. But now, in this moment, everything felt different. Leo's voice broke the silence again, softer this time, almost to himself. If you adjust this coefficient here, and consider the boundary conditions, the solution aligns perfectly. A collective gasp escaped the room. Eyes darted between the janitor and the blackboard, the air thick with disbelief. Evelyn's pulse quickened. Pride warred with a growing unease. She had built her reputation on being untouchable. And yet, Here was someone no one had expected, calmly dissecting her work with precision and insight. This was only the beginning. What Leo would do next would not just shake the lecture hall. It would challenge the very hierarchy of intellect at Whitmore University. After the lecture hall emptied, the murmurs and whispers of students still echoed faintly off the high ceilings. Chairs scraped against the polished wood floors, and the faint scent of chalk lingered in the air. Leo Martinez stayed behind, pushing his mop cart to the corner, but not before stealing another glance at the sprawling equation on the blackboard. He didn't hurry. He never had. Alone now, the room transformed. The intimidating aura of the professor softened in the empty space, leaving only the symbols and the problem, pure and untamed. Leo's eyes traced the elegant loops and sharp angles of the formula. Something was off, a subtle imperfection that made the logic teeter. Most would never notice it, or if they did, they would assume it was a minor misstep in a complex derivation. But Leo's mind worked differently. He crouched slightly, resting one hand on the mop handle as he considered the pattern. Years of quietly solving complex equations in secret had honed his instincts. Numbers spoke to him in ways they never did to anyone else, and now the inconsistency that had teased him during the lecture stood out like a shadow against the bright sun. Even as he worked silently, Leo could feel the weight of judgment from the hall outside. He imagined the students still gossiping, probably exaggerating what had happened. "Did you see the janitor? He actually challenged her." Let them talk. He didn't need applause. He needed clarity, and this equation demanded it. Step by step, he revisited each line of the proof. The coefficient misplacement, the subtle mismatch in boundary conditions, the tiny assumption the professor had glossed over. It all became clearer to him now. A smile tugged at the corner of his lips. Not because he was right, but because he had seen the truth others had missed. And yet, he knew he couldn't announce it yet. Pride and ego had a way of blinding people, even the brightest ones. Evelyn Hargrove would resist acknowledging an error, even if it was obvious. But he would wait. Patience was part of his method. As he stepped back, running a finger lightly along the board to trace the solution he was forming, he realized how close the world was to being stunned. One moment of courage, one bold calculation, and the hierarchy of the lecture hall could be overturned. Leo's dark eyes flicked toward the door. Soon the students would return. Soon the world would watch. And when that moment came, no one would underestimate him again. The next morning, the lecture hall was buzzing again, but this time with an undercurrent of curiosity. Rumors had already begun circulating about the janitor who had dared to question Evelyn Hargrove. Some students exchanged glances, half in disbelief, half in anticipation. Leo Martinez wheeled his mop cart into the room with calm precision, his dark eyes scanning the blackboard as if it had been waiting for him all along. He didn't flinch. When Professor Hargrove's gaze snapped toward him, sharp as a blade. "Leo, I told you to stay out of this," she said, her tone cutting, a tremor of irritation barely concealed. Her posture was immaculate, yet a flicker of doubt danced in her eyes. For the first time, she felt an unfamiliar tension tighten her chest. Leo smiled faintly, setting his mop aside. "Professor, if you'll allow me," he said softly, "I believe I can show the correct solution." A ripple of disbelief passed through the students. Some leaned forward, sensing the gravity of the moment. Evelyn Hargrove straightened, lifting a perfectly arched brow. "Go ahead, then," she said, voice clipped, trying to mask the sudden unease. With deliberate movements, Leo approached the blackboard. His chalk scratched lightly across the slate as he began the calculation, each stroke precise, elegant, and unflinching. Symbols and numbers that had confounded the room now aligned under his hand with an almost artistic clarity. Whispers erupted, growing louder with every step of his method. The student's astonishment was mirrored in Evelyn's, eyes widening slightly as she tried to follow, yet found herself a step behind. This was no ordinary janitor. This was someone who saw the truth hidden beneath layers of assumptions and prestige. By the time Leo reached the final line, the impossible equation had transformed into a flawless solution. The room froze. Even the hum of the ventilation seemed to pause. For the first time, the queen of the lecture hall was silent, and the janitor, once invisible, stood at the center of every eye. When Leo Martinez laid down the final chalk stroke, a hush fell over the lecture hall that was almost tangible. The equation, once a twisted labyrinth of impossible symbols, now stretched across the blackboard in elegant symmetry. Every variable aligned perfectly, every coefficient accounted for. It was flawless. Professor Evelyn Hargrove's fingers froze mid-air, chalk trembling slightly between them. Her confident composure, the armor she had built over years of accolades and recognition, began to crack. The silence pressed against her like a tide, forcing her to acknowledge the truth she had refused to see. She had been wrong. The students erupted, not in applause, but in stunned murmurs and whispers that rippled like electricity through the room. Eyes darted between Leo and the blackboard, between Leo and the professor, disbelief etched on every face. Even the brightest among them, who had been certain of Evelyn's infallibility, now seemed unsure. Evelyn's sharp gaze softened slightly as she studied the janitor standing there, calm and composed, chalk dust on his fingertips, eyes shining with quiet triumph. Every assumption she had made about him, the simplicity of his role, the limits of his knowledge, shattered in that moment. "You solved it," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, a mixture of awe and reluctant respect. She took a step closer, inspecting the board as if seeing mathematics in a new light. And, perfectly, Leo nodded, his expression serene. It wasn't perfect until the underlying error was corrected. Anyone could have missed it. I just took the time to see it. A ripple of realization spread through the lecture hall. The hierarchy of intellect, the assumed divide between professor and custodian, crumbled in seconds. Students whispered fervently, already imagining the story spreading across campus and beyond. Leo's quiet brilliance, long hidden in the background, now shone for everyone to see. For Evelyn Hargrove, it was a moment of reckoning. Pride wrestled with admiration, but in the end, respect won. The equation wasn't just solved, it was a revelation, proving that genius isn't always visible in titles or appearances. Leo stepped back, letting the silence settle. The room had changed forever. By the time Leo Martinez stepped out of the lecture hall, the corridors of Whitmore University were alive with whispers, laughter, and astonished chatter. News of the janitor who had solved the impossible equation spread faster than wildfire. Students hurried past, some stopping to shake his hand, others nudging friends to witness the quiet hero who had just rewritten the rules of intellect on campus. Professor Evelyn Hargrove followed, her heels clicking, against the polished floor, but her expression was no longer one of arrogance. Instead, it carried a mixture of humility and admiration. She had spent her career striving for perfection and recognition, yet Leo, who carried nothing but a mop and unwavering patience, had reminded her that brilliance could come from the most unexpected places. In the following days, headlines appeared in the university newsletter. Janitor outsmarts mathematics prodigy, a lesson in humility and genius. Social media buzzed with clips and images from the lecture hall. Memes celebrated Leo's calm confidence, while students shared screenshots of his flawless solution. The story resonated far beyond Whitmore University. The world loved the underdog who had quietly mastered the impossible. Yet, Leo didn't seek fame. He accepted congratulations politely, smiling quietly, and returned to his daily routine, mopping corridors, tidying lecture halls, quietly observing the world he had momentarily upended. But the respect he had earned lingered. Professors consulted him on complex problems, students sought his insight, and Evelyn herself approached him with a rare, genuine smile. "Perhaps we could work together," she suggested one afternoon, handing him a notebook filled with new theoretical challenges. "There's much I could learn from you." Leo nodded. "I'm ready when you are." The lecture halls, once echoing with doubt and hierarchy, now buzzed with possibility. Genius, they all realized, was not about titles, appearances, or who held the awards on the walls. It was about vision, patience, and courage. And now, as you've followed Leo's journey, here's your turn. Tell us in the comments where you're watching from and what part of this story amazed you the most. If you want more incredible stories of ordinary people doing extraordinary things, don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell. The next moment of brilliance might just be around the corner and you won't want to miss it.